Hello everybody, my name is Trust, or better known as my YouTube alias, Skeletrust, and welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Retrospective, a Five Nights at Freddy's themed podcast where I cover 3 games in 3 different episodes. Also, thank you all so much for joining. The reason I'm doing this podcast is not only for a podcasting class, and that I am a huge fan of the series, but it's also because I rebought the whole Five Nights at Freddy's bundle on Steam not too long ago, and it's the reason I thought to do this podcast. I just love this series to death, and I thought it would be perfect for a video game review, since it normally doesn't take too long to cover each game of the series in excruciating detail, unlike some RPG games where it takes forever. So yeah, that's why I decided to go as simple as Five Nights at Freddy's. Let's start with my personal history of the game. Five Nights at Freddy's 1, which is the game we're covering today in this episode, it means so much to me because it got me into the whole horror game industry. I first heard about this game in late 2014 when it first came out. Friends were talking about it left and right, and it actually wasn't even just friends, it was literally everybody. I didn't really care for Five Nights at Freddy's then, and that was a huge mistake because when I finally played it in early 2015, I was mind blown. It was definitely worth it. I spent many hours on the original game, just trying to uncover the lore and hidden secrets within it, trying to learn all the AI, to the point where I pretty much know the game like the back of my hand. Eventually, I lost the ability to play it, however, so because of my old account, kind of just got deleted. So yeah, it was kind of a bummer. But hey, I have my new account and the Five Nights at Freddy's bundle, and I'm really happy to revisit this game. I actually even bought the Nintendo Switch ports of the first and second game recently. And while it does have cheats, which you might see as a bit of an upgrade, I still think the computer version is a way better way to play it, because it's kind of just a point-and-click game and not necessarily a button-clicking game, so that's why the computer way is the best way to play the game. Anyway, let's talk about the game history. A year before Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott Cawthon released a game called Chipper and Sons Lumber Company. It received pretty poor reviews, and people complained about the characters looking too animatronic-like. I bet you know where I'm going with this. Cawthon was heavily discouraged at first, and he was even thinking about abandoning the whole video game developing thing altogether, until he realized he could use the animatronic flaw to his advantage. This led to the development of, you know what, Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's was released as a full game on a no longer existing platform known as Desera on August 8th, 2014. Given the green light on Steam, it was released on that platform 10 days later. To this day, it's actually the only way you can play the computer version, because, Desera got taken down. Not too long after it, though, it was also released on mobile devices, firstly on Android on August 25th. I'll just say it right now, I just don't think the mobile devices are really the way to play the game, especially when I've already mentioned, point and click is you kind of just need a mouse to do it all, and the mobile devices weren't even all that responsive for Five Nights at Freddy's anyway, so again, I think the computer version is far superior to any other version out there. The game quickly gained a massive cult following upon release, and it's still regarded as not only among the most popular, but the most revolutionary. Cawthon himself never expected the overwhelming popularity this game received, according to his interview with Dawko. Your typical horror game requires you to walk around, to avoid any threats by the specific mechanics being given to you, and solving puzzles to continue uncover lore. That's basically the games of Slender and Amnesia: The Dark Descent. But Five Nights at Freddy's plays this a bit differently. Here, you're staying still, and you're watching as your threats come closer and closer to you, and to avoid them by using the mechanic given to you. However, this actually makes me far more paranoid, and YouTubers like Markiplier have stated that simply the paranoia alone have made it so unique compared to other horror titles. And that's a pretty remarkable story. And speaking of stories, let's get into the actual game story. Now, while other games kind of dive deeper into the lore and all that, the first game is kind of an exception since it's really just a kickstart. It's quite simple. You're playing as Mike Schmidt, who's hired as a night guard to watch over the pizzeria from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., from November 8th to 14th. He only earns $120 a week, an additional 50 cents for an additional night overtime. That is incredibly cheap. He eventually gets fired for tampering with the animatronics, general unprofessionalism, and odor. But anyway, enough with the story. Let's get on with the most important part of a game, the gameplay. In Five Nights at Freddy's, you're placed in a gloomy office, and you're given 2 light buttons, 2 door buttons, and 1 monitor. Using the light and door buttons, you can avoid any threat you can see and avoid any threat coming towards you, and you can use the cameras to see everybody's position. However, you don't want to use too much of any of this because it deducts power, and once power runs out, you kind of just have to hope it turns 6. Luckily, there's a phone guy that helps instruct you on what you're supposed to do on your nights here at Five Nights at Freddy, or Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He even gives you a couple pieces of lore to think about, which, by the way, aren't just from the phone guy. You can uncover it in like multiple parts of the pizzeria by simply looking through the cameras. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's pretty simple mechanics, except the animatronics, though, you probably want to look out for. Speaking of which, let's talk about them right now. Starting with Bonnie the Bunny, your first and most consistent threat. Bonnie only attacks from the left side, and he seems to linger throughout the left side of the building. Heck, he can even teleport from like the dining area to the West Hall corner in like a second. Like, it's insane. Bonnie is definitely the most active animatronic. When you see him at the left door, close it immediately and wait until he goes away. If you fail to do this, he completely blocks your door buttons and your light buttons, making it impossible to dodge him afterwards. And when you lift the camera up, you hear like very subtle moaning. And either you take the camera down or he forces it down. Regardless, you are greeted with a jump scare ending the game. Bonnie's pretty easy to avoid because all you really have to do is just check the lights and you're alright. So Bonnie's pretty easy. And Chica the Chicken, the next one, is no exception to this. She's the second threat, and similar to Bonnie, she attacks in a very similar regard, except she lingers through the right side of the building and attacks through the right door. When you see her, close the door. If you fail to do this, she blocks your buttons, and then you're pretty much dead. Unlike Bonnie, though, Chica stays longer since she's not the most active. Her movements are slower, which can be seen as like kind of an advantage or a disadvantage, because she takes longer to get there, but she also takes longer to leave, meaning she deducts more power. But again, Chica's very easy, so you really don't have to worry about her once you get used to her mechanic. Now Foxy the Pirate. He's kind of unique compared to the other animatronics, as he goes through phases. So the way to avoid Foxy is by simply keeping an eye on him, and when he rushes down to your office, close the left door. However, you want to make sure you keep your eye on Foxy like whenever you can, because if you don't, that's when he decides to come down more and more. If you keep an eye on him, though, chances are that won't happen, and Foxy will be a little nicer to you. So with every attack Foxy deals, the amount of power he takes increases each time since he knocks. So you really want to look out for him. You can activate his running animation early by clicking on the West Hall cam to, get the whole attack over with, but and that's probably the best way to deal with Foxy, because you don't want to do it the other way where you don't even see him coming and he just gets you without even hearing the running, let alone seeing it. So yeah, please just keep an eye on Foxy. Now Freddy Fazbear, the main attraction of the pizzeria. Unlike Bonnie and Chica, he has very strict movement patterns as he goes from dining area to the bathrooms to the kitchen to the East Hall and then to the East Hall corner. Then he goes in a repeated cycle from the East Hall to the East Hall corner through the entire night. Now, you might think that you'd be able to check the blind spots with him, right? Well, no. Actually, he completely bypasses the blind spots, and he can sneak right in behind you and jump scare you and then end your whole game. The way to avoid Freddy is by simply closing the right door when you see him at the East Hall corner. A strategy I have is to close the right door every time you lift the camera up, and vice versa. So yeah, Freddy's pretty easy, but you don't want to slip up because, again, he can sneak right into your office, he can whisper, and then he can end your whole game. Freddy can also attack from the left side when the power runs out. This part is completely luck-based because you really never know how long he's going to play his song and how long he takes to get to the left door. There's really no way to slow this process down. All of this is completely up to the game. It's still possible for the clock to turn 6 once the power goes out, but you're really going to want to hope. And you want to avoid running out of power altogether because at that point you can literally do nothing to help protect yourself. So yeah, this game gets really difficult as time goes on, and some occurrences of defeat are just inevitable as they attack so much. And there's even extra nights, unlike the 6th night. It's very hard, it requires skill, and it's partially luck-based because they attack so much and deduct too much power. However, sometimes they can be actually nice, and they don't attack just not as much as they did, other times. And that way you can barely get out alive. And once you beat the 6th night, there's even a custom night where you can adjust the AI of each animatronic. And you can even set them all to 0. But most are still active because, well, for example, Bonnie and Chica. They move incredibly slowly, but they stay at your door forever, meaning that you can still even die from 4-0 mode. There's also the infamous 420 mode. It's extremely luck-based, and it's only completable through strict strategies. Big Bug actually made the world record, and Markiplier is also famous for it, but it's actually him, Big Bug, who developed the strategy. Scott Cawthon once hindered this mode as impossible, but it wasn't until Big Bug beat it where he added a 3rd star on the screen for that accomplishment. Believe it or not, I actually beat this not too long ago. It took me exactly 35 tries, and yes, I logged it. And I even made a little Reddit post about it, but that's a story for another day. In terms of presentation, it has a pretty scary atmosphere. I personally think it's one of the creepiest and scariest in the entire series. Like, seriously, just the atmosphere and, ambience alone just creeps me out. It gave me nightmares as a kid. The sounds are not even that much different. They're pretty realistic and disturbing. In fact, just the steps just give me goosebumps. At least when I was little. Pretty much used to it now, but when you're playing this the first time, you'll definitely feel that. Now, again, I just need to say this again, it completely nailed the horror aesthetic. Again, due to I already mentioned the paranoia behind it. In conclusion, while it might be a little bit luck-based and unfair at times, and Custom Night might be sorta lacking because it doesn't have a lot of replay value, I can't deny that Five Nights at Freddy is still a classic in the horror industry, and it's still one of the best horror games that has ever been made. It still holds up to the others. It's not my absolute favorite Five Nights at Freddy's game, but it's definitely a close second. I'd give this game a 9 out of 10. Definitely a game that'll give you spooks. Well, that's about it. Thanks again for joining me, and tune in next time for Five Nights at Freddy's 2. What's good, gamers? My name is Trust, and I welcome you back to another installment of Freddy Fazbear's Retrospective, a Five Nights at Freddy's themed podcast where I cover a game per episode in fearful but nostalgic fashion. Before I forget, thank you all for joining me today. Last time on Freddy Fazbear's Retrospective, we took a look at the first game of the Five Nights at Freddy's series, Five Nights at Freddy's. It still holds up as one of the greatest horror games ever made, and is still just as revolutionary as ever. Due to the overwhelming success of the first game, of course there just had to be a sequel. The game in question is Five Nights at Freddy's 2, obviously. I personally can't wait to begin this one. It holds even more of a special place in my heart, and it's personally my favorite Five Nights at Freddy's game. Back when I played and finished the first game in early 2015, I just had to check out the second, and sure enough, I was just as impressed, if not more. I've spent many unhealthy hours on it, just like the first game, trying to uncover lots of its lore and secrets. As I already mentioned on my previous podcast as well, I bought its Switch version for the first game. Since I'm really excited to start reviewing this one, let's get right on with it. Starting on September 12th, 2014, Scott began releasing teasers and promotional posters for the game on his new website titled scottgames.com, also showing that the game was originally planned for release in 2015. These teasers included 2 Bonnies, Withered and Toy respectively, facing opposite from each other, and 2 Foxies, Withered and Mangle respectively, peering from opposite ends of a curtain. Eventually, Scott released a highly suspenseful trailer which got everybody hyped for the game. According to a reliable fan-made wiki, it wasn't until November 10th when the demo was released, containing 2 playable nights. So was an extended demo, containing 3 nights to YouTubers like Markiplier. The full game was released a day later. This game is generally regarded as slightly inferior to the original, but praised just as much, which I personally view as the exact opposite. I personally think it's slightly superior to the original. But anyway, enough about the game history, let's get on with the game story. This game was confirmed to be a prequel to its predecessor, despite it seeming a little bit like a sequel. Taking place on November 8th to 14th, 1987. The grand reopening of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza happens, tossing the old animatronics out of commission and replacing them with the toy animatronics, which are stated to be programmed with facial recognition and local criminal database technology. However, the glitches about moving around at night also carry over to them, and little do they know, the withered animatronics still have the ability to as well. You play as Jeremy Fitzgerald, who's the second night guard to work at the location. He works nights 1 through 6, avoiding all the animatronics before moving over to the day shift. On night 7, Fred Smith gets hired, and then fired for tampering with the animatronics, general unprofessionalism, and, odor. Now, there is more story and lore to uncover surrounding this game, but I best not spoil that for you, considering that Five Nights at Freddy's is not that type of franchise. So without any further ado, let's get on to the gameplay. Just like the first game, you're put into a gloomy office, although not quite as gloomy as before. You're given 2 vent lights, a hallway, and an empty Freddy Fazbear head. There are lights you can check the vents with, and you're even given a flashlight with limited battery, and we'll get to that later. Just like the first game, the phone guy will instruct you on what to do, as it turns out to be the exact same person.
Hello? Hello and welcome to your new summer job at the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
And also like the first game, you have to last until 6 a.m. And just like I did in my first podcast, let's explain all of the animatronics in not super excruciating detail, considering that there's 11 of them. But I'll try to speed right by them so we won't waste too much time. Well, to put it simply, there's the toy animatronics, which consists of Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, technically Toy Foxy, but he's nicknamed Mangle in this game. Lore. And the newcomer, Balloon Boy. There's the Withered animatronics, which consists of Withered Freddy, Withered Bonnie, Withered Chica, Withered Foxy, and Golden Freddy, who didn't play that much of a role in the first game. Oh yeah, there's also the puppet, but he's a completely different story, and I'll get to him last. But for now though, let's start with the new guys. Beginning with Toy Bonnie and Toy Chica, your first threats for the game. To avoid them, you simply just have to flip on the mask for about 4 to 5 seconds when you see them in the vent. Now while Toy Chica happens to go away when you do this, Toy Bonnie actually enters your office flashing your room lights for a solid, let's say 4 to 6 seconds. You're not in any danger when this happens, considering you can't take off the mask once he's already in there. In fact, that goes for any animatronic that does that. These two are kinda easy, but you really have to keep track of them, because if you let them alone too long, well, they jump scare you, ending your game. Mangle is avoided pretty much the same way, except he's actually easier to hear considering in every location he's in, he plays like this garbled static noise. So he's pretty easy to pick out from the rest. However, if you fail to put on the mask, he'll linger above your ceiling, waiting a very random period of time before finally coming down and jump scaring you, biting your face off. Another animatronic using this flaw is Balloon Boy, who doesn't have a very strict pattern, but moves through laughs, so that's how you know he's coming towards you. And eventually he'll get to the left vent, which means that once he appears, you need to, close the mask for 4 to 5 seconds. Failing to do this, he doesn't jump scare you. In fact, he's the only one in the game that doesn't do this. Instead, he completely disables the flashlight for you. And why this is vital, I'll get to that eventually. But once he's there, he does not leave. He may not kill you, but there's no way to get your flashlight back. So at that point, unless it turns 6, you're pretty much screwed. The only toy animatronic that isn't the puppet that works completely differently is Toy Freddy. Now he comes towards you through the hallway. You'll see him get progressively closer and closer until he enters your office and flashes your room lights. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Once this happens, you need to immediately flip on that mask. If you fail to do this in time, if at all, he jump scares you, ending your game. All these animatronics are very simple, but you need to be quick with them, otherwise, well, you're dead. Now on to the Withered animatronics. Withered Freddy, Withered Bonnie, and Withered Chica basically have the exact same method for avoiding them. Just like Toy Freddy, if they enter your office, you must immediately flip on the mask. In fact, I think with them, you need to be slightly quicker than you are with Toy Freddy. So that means, well, be fast. Failing to do this will have them jump scare you. Withered Freddy comes through the hallway, Bonnie comes through the left vent, and Chica comes through the right vent. However, you can't see Bonnie and Chica in the blind spots, so when they appear in your office, just flip on the mask. You don't even really need to check the camera with them. Withered Freddy, however, you can see. Those animatronics are pretty similar, but Withered Foxy is actually completely different. And remember that flashlight I mentioned earlier? Well, here's why this is important. When you see Withered Foxy in the hallway, if he's not being overcrowded by other animatronics, you have to rapidly shine the flashlight at him, as he is completely immune to the Freddy Fazbear disguise. Failing to do this for long periods of time will have him jump scare you, ending your game. Now, that doesn't mean you literally have to flicker the light at supersonic speed. You can just, casually flicker it at him, and that way you won't lose too much battery and you'll still keep him out. But he can be definitely one of the most annoying, if not the most annoying animatronic in the game, as he can literally just, hang around there as the animatronics disable your flashlight by moving, and yes, they can do that, and that's why that's super annoying. So be careful with him. Golden Freddy doesn't appear until night 6, and what you have to do for him is you just have to flip on the mask or flip up the monitor every time he appears in your office. If not that, he otherwise appears in the hallway, where if you see him, do not flash the light at him again, otherwise he will kill you. Golden Freddy can be very, very annoying, and it's what makes Night 6 really, really difficult. Lastly, there's the puppet. To avoid him, you simply just have to keep the music box wound down. That's it. However, if you let the music box down for too long, he'll come flying towards you, and at that point, there is literally nothing you can do to avoid him. Even the Freddy Fazbear head does not fool him. Now, if you see him outside the box, that doesn't mean that he's automatically going to get you. In fact, you can still wind it back up to hold him in place. But once he's gone for good. So keep that thing wound up as much as you can. I wouldn't even try experimenting with that little Easter egg. Whew. Anyway, now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about some of the extra stuff. In between all the core gameplay, you can unlock the mini-games, which uncovers more lore and the infamous Purple Guy, and how he tragically started the events of the pizzeria. Again, I'm not going to spoil that for you. Now, as a lot of people know, this game is much more difficult than the first game, as the nights become more and more extreme. I personally don't think this is the hardest, but yeah, it can still get pretty difficult if you're not used to it. There's also extra nights which you can unlock, such as Night 6. Like the first game requires lots of skill, Golden Freddy makes this even more difficult than before. And people have said this is nearly uncompletable, but I actually beat it on my very first try, probably because I've been playing the game for years. Anyway, then there's also Custom Night. That's also pretty familiar, isn't it? You can adjust the AI of each animatronic, except the puppet, but he has no real AI to begin with. However, this Custom Night is actually far more interesting than the first games, as you actually have challenges and rewards for beating them. For the rewards, you get plushies, which are pretty interesting to look at on your desk. But, yeah, I guess it's not super satisfying. But hey, it's still fun playing them. Like, having only specific animatronics activated and all that. There's also the infamous Golden Freddy challenge, which I still haven't beaten to this day, given how it's nearly impossible. You just need to have really, really, really good luck, and even the most perfect strategy can screw you over. Now, YouTuber Oh Look It's FNAF managed to beat the challenge after approximately 103 tries. Markiplier is also notable for giving this mode a total of 9 hours of attempts to complete this. So it's not impossible, but be prepared if you really want to go on a streak on trying this game. In terms of presentation, like I said, it's slightly less scary than the first game, but it still wields a very creepy atmosphere. The sound design is brilliant, and still pretty disturbing like the first game, if not even better. In fact, I think some of the noises these animatronics make are just perfect. They're perfect examples of how animatronics would attack you. There's also more fleshed out visuals and animations than the first, which make them more pleasant to look at, and scarier, to some extent. In conclusion, other than the difficulty, I think this game holds up just as much as the first, if not more. I personally think that this is my favorite game in the series, not by far, considering I still have a pretty soft spot for the first game, but it's still my absolute favorite. In fact, I'll even go as far as to say that it's probably my favorite horror game of all time. Lots of its elements just work so well for me, and I love it dearly. But anyway, I think I've rambled on long enough. Thank you everybody for joining, and tune in next time for... Oh, right. Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Oh boy. Well, stay tuned.
Hi.
What's good, gamers? My name is Trust, and I welcome you back to another installment of Freddy Fazbear's Retrospective. a
Five Nights at Freddy's
themed podcast where I cover a game per episode in
fearful
but nostalgic fashion. Before I forget, thank you all for joining me today. Last time on Freddy Fazbear's Retrospective, we took a look at Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Just like the first game, it's just as fascinating, and it's what hooked me to the FNAF series ever since. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite horror games of all time. Now with that being said, as fascinating as the first and second game is, I really wish I could say the same about the third one, however. Speaking of which, today I am covering one of my least favorite Five Nights at Freddy's games. As far as history goes, a lot of it has just been negative. I personally just don't like it as much as other people do. But at the same time, I don't really hate it as much as other people do. It's kinda mixed. This was the game that had me take a break with the Five Nights at Freddy's series for a while until the fourth game came out. And ironic given how I was just getting hooked into the series from Five Nights at Freddy's 2. It was a pretty mixed bag for me overall. There were stuff I liked, but also stuff I disliked. I was excited for the game when it was announced, but something bothered me. I don't know whether it was the fact that there was only one major threat, or there were complicated mechanics being implemented into the game. And sure enough, when I played it, I was pretty disappointed. Though, this game has a lot to talk about, and chances are we'll be here quite a while. But anyway, without any further ado, let's get on with the game history itself. Starting on December 6, 2014, Scott began releasing teasers and promotional posters for the game on his website titled scottgames.com. On January 26, 2015, Scott released the teaser trailer for Five Nights at Freddy's 3 on its Steam Greenlight page, the page also containing various in-game screenshots. The game was officially released on March 2nd, 2015, first as a demo given out to Let's Players on Twitch.tv and YouTube, then hours later as a full game available to the public on Steam. An Android version was released on March 7th, 2015, followed by an iOS release on March 12th, 2015. This game has had, once again, quite a mixed reception among the community. There are lots of people who defend it, but also lots of people who oppose it. For very indifferent reasons that I'm not even going to get into, because, once again, mixed reception. Anyway though, enough about the history, let's get on with the premise of the game itself. This game takes place 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed down, where the tragic events that took place there have become nothing more than a memory. To pay homage to these events, because either they're inconsiderate or deranged, a group of people decided to revive the legends and establish Fazbear's Fright. They tried to recreate the events as authentically as they could. They proceeded to go great lengths to salvage anything they discover after 3 decades of decay. They recover some pretty interesting treasures, such as many heads of the animatronics. However, they eventually discover a whole new animatronic, and little do they know, this animatronic has had quite a bit of history. A currently unnamed person takes the role of Night Guard for 6 nights. And that's only the premise. This game gets really deep. But anyway, let's get to the part you've all been waiting for. Just like any other game in the series, you're put into a gloomy office. There's a door to the left, a vent to the right, as well as a window right in front. This time you have access to the maintenance panel, where you can manage devices in aid of your survival. All of these devices alone take about 6 seconds to fix. There's also a fix all option, which allows you to fix them all at once in a matter of 12 seconds. The devices that you can fix here are audio devices, the camera systems, and the ventilation. Some of these errors are caused by the animatronics, but also sometimes randomly as well. But they're never a huge deal as long as you manage them well. Well, at least when you do manage them well. And we'll get to that later. But anyway, just like any other game, you have a monitor. But this is actually a complex monitor, as it allows you to play audio in any camera, and as well as a ventilation camera system where you can seal the vents. Again, just like the previous games, you have to last until 6 AM, but noticeably the hours are much shorter this time around. You also get help from the phone dude, yes, he's actually called the phone dude this time, who gives you advice for the first 2 nights.
Hey, glad you
came back for another night. I promise it'll be a lot more interesting this time. We found some great new relics over the weekend, and we're out tracking down a new lead right now.
But then the other audio clips are played to teach the person about wearing the spring-lock suits.
Hello? Welcome to your new career as a performer/entertainer for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. These tapes will provide you with much-needed information on how to handle/climb into/climb out of mascot costumes.
But as the week progresses, you'll learn that the spring-lock suits have gone terribly, terribly wrong.
Hello. There's been a slight change of company policy concerning use of the suit. Don't. After learning of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, the company has deemed the suit temporarily unfit for employees.
But enough about the simple stuff. This is the stuff you're actually waiting for. What about the animatronics, you ask? Well, they're irritating to say the least. No, seriously, they suck. Well, let's start with the main attraction of Fazbear's Fright, Springtrap, the only animatronic in the entire game that can actually kill you. To avoid Springtrap, you might think it's very simple. All you have to do is play audio devices in a distant room. However, if the room you're playing it in is too far from Springtrap, he won't even budge. Springtrap's pattern is basically just going from one end of the pizzeria all the way to your end. And for some reason, that's just how the pizzeria is designed, I guess. However, that's not the only route he can take. He can also use the vents, which allows him to take shortcuts across the pizzeria. Not all vents are this bad, but some of them literally teleport Springtrap from one camera all the way to your freaking office in a matter of seconds. To avoid this, all you simply need to do is seal the vents. Now, with all this being said, you might think that Springtrap sounds relatively simple to avoid. I mean, it's not like these are hard to do or anything. Yeah, here's the thing. As far as the audio devices go, yeah, that might not seem that bad, but Springtrap gets really, really fast in the later nights. And sometimes, before you even know it, you can play an audio device, but you might not already know that he's gone into an even more distant room than he already was before, meaning that you have to play the audio device again. And due to the fact that audio errors happen ever so randomly, it doesn't help that you have to keep fixing them, basically distracting you from keeping Springtrap at bay. And once again, he goes fast, so maybe he's already at camo 8, but now he's already at camo 5 all of a sudden. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is the vents. Again, pretty simple mechanic, but once again, Springtrap is fast, and somehow even faster in the vents. And when you hear him in the vents, you need to seal that vent as soon as you can. Otherwise, well, there's a very high chance your game is going to be cut short. However, sometimes even when you're sealing the vent, Springtrap goes through anyway, meaning that you've either way wasted too much time, and once again, your game is being cut short. And it, again, doesn't help that some of these vents go all the way from the other end of the entire pizzeria all the way to your office. What kind of fair programming is that? I know there are strategies that keep Springtrap at cam 10 as well as sealing the vent that's over there, but I failed to do this so many times, even on night 4. This isn't even night 6 or 5. This is night 4. I just somehow managed to lose track of him, and the dark cameras don't help either, considering that sometimes it's either it's too dark for you to even see Springtrap, or he's moved along too quickly and now you can't even find him because he's constantly moving around. So, Springtrap is just an odd case, and sometimes you just have to pray he's not going to be mean to you in this night. But, since he's the only animatronic that can kill you, doesn't that kind of relieve a bit of stress? No, not really, because even though the other ones can't kill you, they can still really, really screw you over. There are some exceptions, like Phantom Freddy, for instance. And yes, these are the Phantom animatronics, because FNAF lore, and therefore it makes sense. But anyway, let's talk about Phantom Freddy. So when you see him walking across the window, well, you simply just have to ignore him and keep checking the maintenance panel and camera system. But if you don't do that, he'll jump scare you, giving you a ventilation error. Since ventilation is really important, like I just talked about, you need to keep that thing at bay at all times. But a simple strategy for Phantom Freddy is simply just ignoring him, considering the way to avoid him is simply keeping your eye on the cameras and maintenance panel. That's pretty much it. And Phantom Freddy is pretty much a cakewalk, and certainly the easiest animatronic in the game. But now we've got the bullcrap animatronics, like Phantom Chica. So, Phantom Chica appears on one camera and one camera only. Specifically, camera 7. To avoid her, you simply just don't look at camera 7. Because once you do, and if you see her on those arcade screens, flip the camera down and check over to your left, you're getting jump scared. How do you avoid that? Well, there actually is no way to avoid that, unlike any other Five Nights at Freddy's game in existence. Once you check camera 7, you're getting a jump scare from Phantom Chica, whether you like it or not, and also receiving a ventilation error. So, in simpler terms, do not check camera 7. Or if you do have to, make it very, very temporary. And, by the way, there's going to be a lot of Phantom Chicas in this game that just require to look away from a camera very, very quickly. That's not the case for Phantom Chica, though, because once you look at her, you're getting a ventilation error no matter what. There's also Phantom Foxy, who's also relatively simple to avoid. For Phantom Foxy, all you have to do is just try not to look to the left when he's there. You can tell this by not going all the way left, but left enough so you can see, like, his hook. And then look back over to the camera, and back again, and Phantom Foxy should be gone. If he jump scares you, though, he's giving you another ventilation error. So, you're going to want to do this every time. Just don't look all the way to your left every time you put the camera down, just to make sure that Phantom Foxy isn't there. There are many who have fallen victim to the whole Phantom Foxy scheme. But anyway, now we have Phantom Mangle, who's basically a Phantom Chica. However, unlike Chica, Mangle can actually be avoided. And that's simply by checking another camera fast enough before she forces it down. Or he, I don't know. Scott has never been specific on Mangle's gender. But what she does is not even jump scare you, but provide an audio distraction which completely drowns out any other sound you'll be hearing in the game. Meaning that if Springtrap calls an event, you won't even hear it until it's probably too late. So, yeah, it's best not to mess with Mangle. And when she's done creating that audio distraction, she gives you an audio error. So yeah, Phantom Mangle is pretty annoying. Then there's Phantom Balloon Boy, who appears in any camera, and how to avoid him, simply flip to another camera fast enough. If you don't do this, Phantom Balloon Boy will jump scare you, giving you a ventilation error. Now, he's not as annoying as the other ones, but he can still be a doozy if you're not paying attention. Lastly, we have what I consider the most annoying Phantom animatronic of them all, Phantom Puppet. And if you remember how it was annoying that you had to keep winding the music box, well, that's probably nothing compared to this. Puppet appears in one camera only, just like Phantom Chica and Phantom Mangle. Camera 8. And you have very, very little time to react. Because otherwise what he does this time is appear in your face and creating kind of an audio distraction, but it completely blocks your view of the camera and maintenance panel. And this also means you can't avoid Phantom Freddy or Phantom Foxy, considering you can't lift up either of those to really, do anything. But it also means that you can't do anything against Springtrap, whether he crawls into a vent or just simply goes closer to you. And this jump scare can last as long as 17 seconds. 17! That is more than enough to screw you over entirely. So, the strategy for Phantom Puppet? Do not ever look at Camo 8 unless you absolutely have to. It is incredibly risky because you have very, very little time to react. Probably only a quarter of a second. So Phantom Puppet is just evil. And that was all the animatronics. And while not all of them are a doozy, a lot of them are. And this is just honestly what ruins the game for me, because not all their mechanics are even that fair. There's actually more to this game than what meets the eye. There are the mini-games, which uncover more lore, as well as the purple guy. It involves around animatronics walking around the pizzeria, and also getting, wouldn't say murdered, but more so a breakdown from the purple guy. Because, they're animatronics. And there's also secret mini-games, which you can unlock by doing specific things in the gameplay itself, like entering a code in the wall, or simply clicking on a poster. This involves around the animatronics like Toy Chica collecting cupcakes, Balloon Boy collecting balloons, or even Mangle recollecting his or her body parts to the animatronics, because Mangle's a robotic mess. But anyway, back to the gameplay itself. This is what I consider the hardest and most unfair game in the entire series, despite people thinking it's usually Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Like the previous games, there are extra nights, such as Night 6, otherwise known as Nightmare. There sadly is no custom night this time, but it's instead replaced by Insane Aggressive mode. In simpler terms, this one's just almost uncompletable. Just don't attempt it unless you feel really lucky. It also offers an artwork and jump scare collection by beating the game, and also a cheat selection once you get the good ending. You can earn 4 stars, 1 for beating the 5th night, 2nd for beating Nightmare, and 3rd for beating the 5th night, but with the good ending, beating Nightmare with aggressive mode. And yeah, there's a lot to this game, but I best not explain it in full detail because I really wouldn't want to spoil anything. Whew, that was a lot to talk about in one game, but let's get to the presentation side of things and just be done with this one. Unlike the previous games, I never found this one scary in the slightest. Maybe it has a semi-creepy atmosphere at best, but it's just a little too dark for my liking, and like I already said, the cameras are very prone to having problems with that. There are fleshed out animations, but it's subtle, so it doesn't really work for me. And those jump scares, like I said before, I never found scary. Now, yeah, I know I said I got used to the jump scares in FNAF 1 and 2, and they're to the point where it's not scary anymore. FNAF 3, I just never was, or ever will be scared of. In the slightest. And it's really just a lot more frustrating than it is scary, in all honesty. So, in simpler terms, the presentation is alright, but it definitely could be a lot better. Well, in conclusion, I can't really say this game has aged very well in what it was trying to be. It's not very scary, the mechanics are just way too frustrating, and the good things like the lore just don't really make up for it, unfortunately. No, I don't hate it. In fact, I don't even really oppose it in any way. There are good parts about the game, but it's still a very mixed bag for me. So, if I had to give it a rating, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. And hopefully, I'll never have to return to this one anytime soon. But with that being said, I think we have reached the end of our 3-game marathon for Freddy Fazbear's Retrospective. So, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me one last time in this nostalgic adventure. It was a lot of fun to review these games, to an extent. The first and second game hold very special places in my heart. And while there have been massive disappointments like the third game, that doesn't stop me from loving the series as a whole. I look forward to every new installment Coffin cooks up. And with that being said, thanks for joining me on this journey, and I bid you adieu.
Popcorn